Alright guys, this is Phoenix Ember. I'm going to be explaining my deck construction to you guys, since a lot of people seem to not understand that this is an original build and not an empty jar deck. Now you'll see it has a lot of the cards that you'll see in an empty jar deck. Morphing Jar, Book of Eclipse, Book of Moon, and the draw cannons. But you also see that it does not have cards like Feather of a Phoenix or things like that that allow you to recycle cards into your graveyard in it. I'll show you guys that card now. Feather of... let's see. A lot of people run it with this card. You discard one card, add one card from your graveyard to the top of your deck, and then there's also Magical Stone Excavation, which a lot of people run in empty jar decks. As you can see, discard two cards, target one spell card, and graveyard, add to your hand. People use this card to recycle Card Destruction, Book of Eclipse, and Book of Moon. Or they play it right before playing Card Destruction to add. They play Feather of Phoenix before playing Card Destruction to add a card to their hand. So here's my build for my Sleeping Shadow deck. Now, this is an absolute wall deck. This is not an offensive deck in any way, shape, or form. Every card that involves milling is meant for disrupting people's strategy. I'll explain that now. Most cards, almost every card in the meta, requires attacking at some point to defeat the enemy. Well, I stopped that with Wabaku, 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 Threatening Roar, Threatening Roar, Threatening Roar, Battle Fader, Battle Fader, Battle Fader, Swift Scarecrow, Swift Scarecrow, Swift Scarecrow, and of course, One Day of Peace. That's 13 cards in this deck meant for taking absolutely zero battle damage, or in One Day of Peace effect damage, forward turn. That guarantees you a turn of salvation, which is great. The weakness is Battle Fader, who is easily Solemn Warninged. Well, what happens with this deck is, let's say... Oh, also, some people wonder about Destiny Hero Defender. Well, Destiny Hero Defender is a solid level 4 wall. He helps the opponent draw cards. And then he's also a very good choice for Zenmeister, who allows me to repeat effects that I've used. So, Monster Reborn makes Bring 2 out. The opponent will usually destroy him, but his high defense makes him hard to be attacked over. In the current games, where 2800 is not an unheard of attack, he's becoming less useful. I might switch him out for an Arcana Portfolio the Fool, who is also a good target for Monster Reborn. The Dark Bribes negate spells and trap cards, which can protect your monsters or even your set traps from being destroyed. That's a good counter block card. Pot of Avarice will let you put back, when you run out of Scarecrows, more if a Battle Fader has been put in the graveyard by a card effect like Card Destruction. You can always activate Pot of Avarice to add 5 cards to your deck. Nothing will frustrate the opponent more than putting 3 Swift Scarecrows back in there. Needleworm, milling cards is very key in a lot of decks, because most people rely on so many cards in their deck. Some decks require some cards for the strategies. He's also really good against a lot of spell book builds. A lot of people don't understand what I mean when I say that. Well, I don't care what the spell books are doing, as long as I can always Wabaku, Swift Scarecrow, or Battle Fader. Down here I have Reckless Greed. They're a great side deck card against spellbook decks, because, just a simple draw power. A good substitute is No Hope. Hope for Escape. This card here, which I'm actually about to change out for the Reckless Greeds now, because I've been trying that in my real life deck and they work better against Prophecy. Benefit of Hope for Escape. The disadvantage of Hope for Escape is you have to pay 1,000 life points to draw one card for every 2,000 difference between yours and your opponent's. So, paying 1,000 life points isn't that big a deal. I'm trying to come up with some clever strategies with Hope for Escape and Emergency Provisions, because if you pay 1,000 life points, so say you play 3 Hope for Escapes, and then activate emergency provisions. You would then increase your life points by 3,000 or whatever else you have on the field. I'm kind of curious to see if anyone can come up with a build for that. If they can, let me know. That'd be great. Anyways, that's a tangent. Draw cards. Draw cards are great because they let you draw cards. People say that, well, how are you doing that in a mill deck? Well, this is not a mill deck. This is essentially a stall deck. It's a stall deck. It has some cards that will mill, and make the opponent run out of cards. And yes, you win when your opponent runs out of cards, but it does not do that. It's meant to stop everything your opponent does in its tracks. Needleworm, Morphing Jar, and Morphing Jar number 2 are great targets when you have Book of Eclipse on the field. I can't help it. You can make your opponent draw 5 cards and then discard 5 cards if they end their turn with 6. One thing you see a lot of when you play with this deck is the opponent will summon all their big Exceeds monsters out, and then they will just keep repeatedly using effects like Papillion, I believe is what it's called. The butterfly. Let's see. Probably spelled it wrong. Here we go. Papil Operative. This one here. I love when someone activates Papil Operative when I have a Morphing Jar number 2 on the field, because then they always they feel like they just fucked themselves up completely. And then you see people playing Jin cards, specifically, where is he at? This guy right here does nothing against my deck at all. Wonderful card. Stops absolutely nothing I do. So I'll see a field with one of him and one Papil Operative, and then maybe some big Exceeds monsters that have already used up their effects. This deck's weakness is Modulce cards, which is the point. Modulce decks, and sometimes Dark World decks, depending on the build, which is why Dimensional Fissure is a great card. Stopping your opponent from sending any cards to the graveyard. Everything gets banished. There's nothing helpful to them from that card. And then there's Necro Valley, which stops people from targeting cards in the graveyard themselves. Doesn't really help with the 2 decks I just listed. It helps with Modulce a little bit more than Dark Worlds. Then you have Torrential Tribute in the side deck, also for any deck that swarms with repeatable effects or does not lock their own field down. Archlord Christia, it seems like it's hard to get out, but it's really not when you have so many stall cards. If you get Archlord Christia out against an Elemental Dragon deck, you can safely assume that you have a long time before they can do anything, unless they have a blaster in their hand. Hand Destruction, it's a great sub when you're playing against Dark World decks. You take out Card Destruction for Hand Destruction, maybe take out Morphing Jar for a Hand Destruction. It's a good way to make things linger. Although I always keep Morphing Jar in for against Dark Worlds, because YOLO and shit. It's also a good substitute for Pot of Avarice if your opponent doesn't play anything with attacks. If your opponent's not attacking, you can't discard your Scarecrow. Burn decks are a strong weakness against a strength against this deck. If they burn faster than you do cause them to mill. I'd always say if you look for Chain Strike setups. If someone starts activating large combos, it's a good idea to activate 2 Wabakus, one right after the other, so they cannot activate Chain Strike. The reason I say this is because Chain Strike doesn't allow you to play it if multiple cards with the same name are in the chain right here. The benefit of activating 2 Wabakus then becomes obvious. It's not a solid counter strategy, but it does help. Morphing Jar number 2 is great for wiping out the field. That is your killer card. Cards that cannot be destroyed will get wrecked by Morphing Jar number 2. Cards that have effects that activate when they go to the graveyard, just absolutely destroyed by Morphing Jar number 2. And cards that have effects that will wipe you out, again, destroyed by Morphing Jar number 2. He is essentially a solid trump card. And then there's the fact that your opponent is then forced to summon monsters. They can lose their high-level monsters to the graveyard with this card, because you have to shuffle all your monsters. It gets rid of extra deck cards. They do not count for the special summon. That's great, because it's only card there since the main deck. Then you have the special summon. You mill, essentially, until you you get the same number of monsters you sent to your main deck. Especially summon only the level 4 ones to the field and face on defense position. The big monsters will then get sent to the graveyard. Great combo. Better with Dimensional Fissure, because then they can't like counter with like say Monster Reborn after that. So there you have it. If you have any questions about this deck, feel free to post them in the comment section below, and I will reply. I do reply to my comments. Subscribe somewhere in the top part, and I will be doing another deck coverage shortly in the future. This has been J Phipps of Overdrive Games and Anime Shop. You can call me Phoenix Ember, and I'm out.